Hello, welcome to my channel. So cast yourself back to 2023. I was peak into my video game collecting high. I at the time was very much into collecting DS games, and I just recently brought myself a new 2DS following picking up the hobby in lockdown. And at the time I remember doing a lot of research and looking into sort of game emulation, which is what brought me to the world of sort of Android handhelds like this. So this was the Retroid Pocket 3, which I purchased at the time. I think I paid like £110 for it, and I downloaded a few games on it. I did play a little bit at the time, but I didn't really end up playing that much as I liked. I find myself that I kept returning to my DS and playing the games that I'd brought through that. As the years went by, I kept trying to get into playing this, but I found that it could never really scratch the itch that I was looking for with handheld gaming until I rediscovered the PSP. So this was my childhood PSP, and I find that I have been playing this a lot more and enjoy playing this a lot more than what I do with Android handhelds like this one. So I thought it'd be interesting in today's video to talk about the pros and cons on each and why I prefer a retro game console like a PSP over an Android console. So let's get into it. So this was the Retroid Pocket 3 in sort of a nice vintage, I think it's the NES style, so the grey style with the coloured buttons, which I really like. This device itself has a 4.7 inch touchscreen. It has clickable L3 and R3 analog sticks, a D-pad and action buttons. It also has a micro HDMI output, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and then a headphone jack as well. And then the battery typically lasts around 6 to 8 hours playtime, depending on what you're playing. And more often than not, Android consoles like this, if you look at them in the long term, can be cheaper to buy. So depending on the model and what you're looking for, prices can vary wildly. So the Retroid Pocket 4 at the moment, that costs around $139 or £104. And why I say it's more cheaper in the long term, it's because you're not typically buying games for them, are you? You're downloading emulators and installing game files on it that way. And as people that like collecting retro video games will often know, games can vary in price quite wildly as well. So specific games that are quite expensive are like the Pokemon games, and they I've seen can vary in price up to the hundreds of pounds depending on what versions you want. But even just like your standard Pokemon DS games cost like £30. So that quickly mounts up if you are buying a retro console and then buying a load of games, which isn't the issue when it comes to emulation. You can just scroll online and find whatever games you want and put them on the console. And because of this, I would say that it makes these sort of consoles more portable. So when I brought this, I also brought a case, and literally that's just it, the case. There's no need to carry anything else. I do have the charging cable for it in there, so you could easily just carry that around and that's it. And some of these Android devices get really small as well, so are quite pocketable, whereas with a PSP, when you've got it in the case and you've got all your games, it can be a lot more to carry, so it just doesn't end up being as portable. And when it comes to Android handhelds like this, you can obviously emulate and play a lot more games. So you can not only play PlayStation 1 and PSP games, you can also play Game Boy games, Sega games, basically depending on what console you've got, you can play games up to a certain degree. So I think with this I can just about push a couple of GameCube games on it, but mainly it's PlayStation 1 and PSP games that I originally brought it for. And as well, you can be very customizable with it, so you can customize the interfaces and basically truly make it your own sort of console. And as it's essentially just an Android phone with a controller attached to it, pretty much, and just no SIM card. You can use it for more than just games. So you can search the internet, watch YouTube, download Android games, and yeah, it basically can be a console if you want it to be a console, but it could also just be sort of a glorified phone. But it does come with its issues. I found that consoles like this, there's a lot of setup required. So when you first get the console, you have to do a lot of installing of emulators, installing your games, and then there's setup for the games themselves to make sure that they work on specific profiles, and a lot of tinkering to try and make sure that games run as best as they can, which can be a lot of faff. And if you're not really bothered by doing that sort of stuff, it can basically be a hassle. I also find with Android consoles like this, you're kind of contending with constant iOS updates. If you're not playing it regularly, like I find, I can often find that I'm loading it up and I've got to update it, which with a retro handheld, you don't have that issue. Another sort of main thing with handhelds as well that I find is that they're constantly updating the models of them. So this was the Retroid Pocket 3, and I bought this in 2023, but since then they've released a few more models. So now they're on the Retroid Pocket 6, and then there's also many different other Android consoles as well that you can buy with new models coming out all the time. And if you want to be the person that always has sort of like the latest technology and stuff like that, it can often mean that quickly your console becomes redundant. But I think I find my main issue when I'm playing a console like this is there's just too much distraction and choice, because I've got so many games installed on it and access to the internet, and I can play Android games. I often find when I load up the console, I have a bit of decision paralysis. I don't really know what I want to play, and I'll start playing a game and then I'll hop into another game. And I know that's a bit of a me problem, but I do find with sort of my PSP, because you can only carry certain games with you, so when I'm travelling I can only take certain games with me, I feel like the decision has to be a lot more considered on what I'm playing, and I'm really trying to play through specific games start to finish. And again, I could do that on here. I just find that when I'm got access to the games, I find it harder for me to not just quickly chop and change. And I think sort of one of the main reasons why I particularly have been enjoying my PSP over sort of my Android handheld, and just that has been collecting dust in my drawer, my Android handheld, is nostalgia. I used to play my PSP all the time as a kid and thoroughly enjoy it, and I've just got so much nostalgia for the console. I enjoy and love the noise of the disc drive when you put the discs in it. I just think that's really fun. And another sort of big thing with retro gaming, for me anyway, is collecting games and collecting the consoles. The fun is in going out and looking in shops like CEX and independent retro game stores and on eBay to try and find the games that are missing from my collection. Like I brought this case recently off eBay so I could carry a few more games with me when I'm out and about on holiday. But I enjoy just going into shops where I'm in a new town or city and going into the local CEX to see if there's any games on my list that I want. And I often find as well that the games I'm after aren't necessarily that expensive. So a few of the games that I bought recently, one was sort of £1.50, and then it sort of ranged in price up to £8. So they're not loads of money, they're nowhere near as much money as they used to be back in the day. And to some degree, sort of this sort of retro game console and retro games are sort of cheaper initially. So looking online, consoles, second-hand PSPs range from sort of £50 to £100 on eBay. So it is not super expensive to sort of get into collecting and having a PSP. It's just more, say, in the long run, where if you're trying to build out a big collection of childhood games, and if you want sort of those more expensive games, that's where things can get more costly and more expensive than an Android. Another thing I enjoy is collecting the video games themselves. I think there's something really fun about having all the actual boxes on your shelf of all the individual games that you physically own. I'm very much into sort of collecting more physical media over digital copies at the moment. I just think it's nice to actually physically own a copy of the game and have the game rather than it just be a file on your device. I also just really enjoy box art and sort of the old games, so I think this is definitely sort of another reason why I enjoy the PSP over sort of Android consoles. Yeah, it's just so nostalgic having all the old cases, especially I love seeing them all lined up on my shelf. And I guess on a lesser degree, this isn't really a reason why I use it, but a PSP can be used for music, and it can be modded as well if you're into that. But it's mainly sort of the nostalgia of playing childhood games that I have that is the reason that I had it. So when it comes to cons, obviously the PSP does have some. As I've said, you need to carry all your games when you're out and about if you want to play several different games, and games can range quite wildly in price, as I've said, and you're also obviously limited to the game's catalogue unless you are modding it. But then I think as soon as you do that, you kind of, for me, it's fallen in the same use and have the same issues as an Android console, in the fact that it's just too much choice. If I'm loading it with so many different games, it's kind of defeating the point of why I want to play a console like this, and that's to try and snap my mind out of scrolling too much and hopping between games. I want to be considered with what I'm playing and try and play it through. And I think that's kind of that, and nostalgia is the main reason why I enjoy playing my PSP over sort of my Android handheld console, and why this has been gathering dust in my drawers. But this, I'm finding that I'm playing increasingly more and enjoy more. I felt like that was a bit rambly, but I'd love to know your opinion and what you think. Obviously, all of this was my opinion, and I know that people do enjoy playing Android consoles and emulating games, but for me, just the joy is in the collecting and playing the old consoles and the nostalgia side of things. So hopefully you found that enjoyable. Please leave a comment and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.